Moving into lesson 3, we're going to start looking at our cosine law. So our cosine law is over here. You do not need to memorize it. All you need to really know is how to use it. Angle C is the angle you would be looking for, right? Should always be, the C should be always opposite to angle C. So what that means is when you set up this equation, your C value should always be the side length opposite to the angle you're looking for or opposite to the angle that you have. And we'll look at that a little more through examples. So the cosine law we use in 2 scenarios. So we use the cosine law when we know all 3 sides and when we are given 2 sides and the contained angle. So contained angle just means the angle in between those 2 sides. So here's an example where you have 2 sides and an angle in between. And here's an example. The easiest way for me is if I don't have an angle and an opposite side, then I'm probably using the cosine law. So we use the sine law when we have an angle and an opposite side. We use the cosine law when we don't have that. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to write down the equation just to start with. So I have c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cos c. So when I fill this out, x would be the side that I'm trying to find, so that would be my c side. A and b would be the 20 and the 25. Does not matter which one you put where. So you could make A 20 and B 25 or vice versa. You'll get the same answer regardless. So I'm going to go 20 squared plus 25 squared minus 2 bracket 20 bracket 25 cos and then the angle, which is 30 degrees. So now in this case, we have all of this information. We're going to type that whole thing in our calculator. As we've talked about in other lessons, you need to be in degree mode or you're going to get the wrong answers for everything. So make sure you're in degree mode. So we're going to type it in. So I have 25 squared plus 20 squared minus 2 bracket 20 bracket 25 bracket cos and then our angle of 30 bracket enter. There we go. So we have 158.974596. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that down in my note package. And then from here, I can square root to find the side length. So I'm going to square root both sides. And I'll go second function square root. You could type that in, but I'm going to go second answer just because it's faster. Enter, and there's my answer, 12.6 centimeters. Sometimes I have kids who forget to square root. So I think really when you look at the picture, does your answer make sense? So if you get 158, does that make sense in that diagram? No, it doesn't. So that should be a clue that, hey, I forgot a step. I forgot to square root. Okay. Let's try the next one. So again, we're looking for side x. A and b is the 16.1 and the 15.9 in either order. So 16.1 squared plus 15.9 squared minus 2 bracket 16.1 bracket 15.9 cos 15 degrees. I'm going to type that all in. So 16.1, oh, I keep putting 0.1 squared plus 15.9 squared minus 2 bracket 16.1 bracket 15, oh, I put a 0 in there by accident, bracket 15.9 bracket cos 15. Great. That's our answer, 17.48. We're going to write that down. And then we need to make sure we don't forget to square root. So again, if you look at that answer, does it make sense in the picture that this would be bigger than the other 2 sides? No, it doesn't. So we know, hey, we have another step here. We have to square root that answer. Let me go back. So I'm going to go second square root, second answer, Boom, my answer is 4.2 if I round to the nearest tenth. Centimeters. Great. All right, moving on. This is where it gets a little more complicated. Now we're going to try to find an angle. Okay, because this is, do you see these two dashes? That tells me it's an isosceles triangle. So this is 10 meters, which means this is also 10 meters. So when you set this up, the 7 is opposite to the angle that you're trying to find, right? So then the 7 should be like your c squared. So I should have 7 squared equals 10 squared plus 10 squared minus 2 bracket 10 bracket cos x. Okay, so I always tell kids type it in parts. So type the 7 squared in. That should give you 49. And then type the 10 squared plus 10 squared in. That should give you 200. Right? And then we have minus, and then if we type 2 times 10 times 10, that also gives me 200 cos x. Sometimes I have kids, and this is a really common mistake, and they'll try to type like that whole thing in, but you can't because it goes back to BEDMAS, right? Multiplication occurs before subtraction or addition. So like that cos x is going to be times to the 200, right? So we can't take 200 minus 200 because I have to times the 200 to the cos x before I would subtract it from that 200. So that's wise. So I just kind of do it in two parts. I do the 10 squared plus 10 squared and then the 2 times 10 times 10. Now from here we got a little bit of algebra, so we're going to subtract that 200 over 49 minus 200 gives me negative 151 equals negative 200 cos x. Then I divide the negative 200 over. And if I type negative 151 divided by negative 200, I get 0.755 equals cos x. And then I'm going to go second function cos, and I get 41 degrees if I do that. All right, let's go ahead and try the next one. So this time, notice how 3.7 is opposite to the angle I'm trying to find, so it should be my c value. So now when I write this out, I have 3.7 squared equals 6.2, again, a and b can be in either order, plus 4.3 squared minus 2 bracket 6.2 bracket 4.3 cos z. Then we just type it in. 3.7 squared is 13.69. 6.2 squared plus 4.3 squared is 56.93. 2 times 6.2 times 4.3 is 53.32 cos z. Now from here, I'm going to subtract that 56.93 over 13.69 minus 56.93 gives me negative 43.24 equals negative 53.32. Then divide that over. And then when we type that in, we get positive 0.81095 equals cos z. So then if I go second function 0.81909, I get 36 degrees. Great. Moving on, example 3, it says sketch the triangle of the given equation. So we're looking for side S. Side S is opposite to the 67 degrees. And then the 12 and 14 are either side. Doesn't matter. So it's going to look something like that. Okay, so now if I'm trying to find S, right, this is an easy one. We get to just type it in our calculator. There's no algebra required. Let's go ahead and type that in. So I'm going to go 12 squared plus 14 squared minus 2 bracket 12 bracket 14 bracket cos 67, enter. That gives me 208.7, and then of course I have to square root that answer, and I get 14.4. So I'm going to go back to my notes here. I think S squared gave me 208.71434. So then I square root to get the value for S, which ends up being 14.4. Okay, Brent draws a triangle. That triangle has lengths of 14, 19, and 6. My picture doesn't really match, but that's okay. We'll just go with it. Find the angles and determine if it's acute. So acute triangle means all the angles would be less than 90 degrees. Okay, so we can start with whatever angle we want. I'm going to start with this angle right here. So that's opposite to the 19. So I have 19 squared equals 14 squared plus 6 squared minus 2, 14, 6 cos C. Type it in parts. 19 squared on our calculator gives us 361. 14 squared plus 6 squared gives me 232. Minus 2 times 14 times 6 gives me 168 cos C. Subtract the 232 over. And then I get 129 equals negative 168 cos C. Divide the negative 168 over. And I get negative 0.767857. And if I go angle C, I get 140 degrees. Whew. All right, so now I know this is 140 degrees. So from here, you could use the sine law because it's a lot faster to find one of the other angles. So that's what I'm going to do. And I think I'll find this angle up here. So that 140 is opposite to the 19, but we can't use the rounded. We would have to use that decimal, which we would have got on our calculator, which is 140.16185. When you have multi-step problems, you don't want to round too early, or sometimes it does throw your final answer off. So that's over 19, and it equals sine B over 6. So then I just cross multiply and divide, and I'll find that angle B ends up being 11.67157, which rounds to 12 degrees. Okay. Right away, though, I'm not, like, I can find the third angle, but as soon as I find this 140, can actually answer the question. So no, it's not acute, because that 140 is bigger than 90 degrees. Great. Okay. Example 5. The diagram shows a roof with parallel support beams, DE and AB. The following requires the angle formed at the peak. So the peak would be like the very tippy top. It has to be within a range of 70 degrees to 80 degrees so that snow and ice does not build up. So we need to find this. This looks like a complicated triangle, but really we're just going to ignore that other support beam ED and treat it like one big triangle. We're trying to find that angle. we're going to use the cosine law. We see that it's opposite to that 20. One part of this question that makes it hard is this is feet, right? So with feet, 19 feet and 6 inches is actually the same as 19.5 feet because there's 6 inches there's 12 inches in a foot. So 6 out of 12 is 0.5. So that can be a little tricky for kids. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill this in. So 20 is opposite to the side or angle I'm trying to find. So I have 20 squared equals 19.5 squared plus 10 squared minus 2 bracket 19.5 bracket 10 cos C. So then from here I have 400, 19.5 squared plus 10 squared is 480.25, and then 2 times 19.5 times 10 is minus 390 cos C. Okay, so then from here I subtract the 480.25 over, and I have negative 80.25 equals negative 390 cos C. Divide the negative 390 over, and that gives me 0.20576 equals cos C. And then I can go angle C equals 78 degrees. So then it's between 70 and 80, so yes, it will pass. All right, last question. A three-pointed star is made up of an equilateral triangle and three congruent isosceles triangles. Determine the length of each side of that equilateral triangle. So this is what I'm looking for. Okay, this is cosine law, right? Because I have a contained angle. So this is an easy one because I get to find a side length. I'm going to call it C. A and B are both 60. 60 squared plus 60 squared minus 2 bracket 60 cos 20. Type that all in your calculator and you should get 400. Actually, you know what? I'm going to type it in. So I have 20 squared. No, why did I put 20? 60 squared plus 60 squared minus 2 bracket 60 bracket 60 bracket cos 20. Enter. 434, square root that, and that is my answer, 20.83, which rounds to 21. Let's write that down. Square root, so we got 21 centimeters as our final answer. Cosine law, definitely trickier than the sine law, especially when you got to find those angles. So make sure you try some of the textbook questions, especially with those angle ones, because those are a little harder.